Hello and welcome to SoVT Book Talk. I'm your host, Karen Simpson McVicker, and we're so excited to have you here with us for episode 3. This month, I'm joined again by Jess Hunsaker, who is the events coordinator at the Northshire Bookstore in Manchester, Vermont. Hey, Jess.
Hi, Karen.
It's so nice to see you again.
Yes, it is. We have so much fun doing this.
I know, and happy holidays. We're in the
Yeah.
season.
Absolutely.
And I know you're really excited about our author guest today, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce her.
Yes, today we have Shiela Liming joining us. She is an associate professor at Champlain College in Burlington, Vermont, and is the author of 2 previous books, What a Library Means to a Woman and Office. She's been featured in the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, as well as in periodicals ranging from People magazine to Book Forum and Slate. And her essays have appeared in venues like The Atlantic, McSweeney's, the Los Angeles Review of Books, Public Books, The Point, among others. And today we're here to discuss her book, Hanging Out, which I understand was the answer to a Jeopardy question this past May.
It was.
So I'm very curious to hear what that question was, and I can't wait to just discuss it with you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here. I was actually sitting in a lecture at the Generator Space in Burlington last spring. It was a lecture on AI when I got a text from a friend that was like, dude, you're on Jeopardy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then she sent me a screenshot, which was a picture of the Jeopardy question on there. And the question was, what 2-word phrase, the name of a recently published book, is, and I think it said a synonym for killing time or something like that, and the answer was hanging out.
That's so cool.
Very cool.
It was quite a surprise.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I love Jeopardy. So I'm so interested in hearing kind of a rundown on Hanging Out and what it's about, and then we can kind of delve in and chat about it.
Sure. So Hanging Out, subtitle The Radical Power of Killing Time, is a book about hanging out. I view it as kind of a manifesto of sorts, because in it I am arguing for the importance of hanging out and also for reclaiming what I think of as kind of a lost art, something that I think we used to do pretty easily and naturally as humans, but maybe has become a little bit more difficult in our hyper-scheduled lives. So the book is an examination of different forms of hanging out, including parties and hanging out with strangers and hanging out at work with colleagues and various forms of killing time. And it's also drawn a lot from personal experience as I talk about my own attempts at hanging out and sometimes failed discoveries in hanging out as well.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine that, especially in this post-COVID world, this wake, it's something that would be very poignant for a lot of us to delve into. I feel like personally, I forgot how to do this, to spend time with people and to carve that time out and kind of feel present and be intentional about being in spaces and being social. And I just think that that's something that so many of us can relate to right now, particularly. So you mentioned that you have also kind of encountered these moments where you felt like you were failing at hanging out. Could you expand more on that?
Sure, yeah. I was thinking about the subject of the book, I think, for several years, but it really did begin to take shape for me, of course, during the high point of the COVID pandemic when I was doing zero hanging out and thinking a lot about it. But in the book, one of the things that I was interested in is my own nostalgia for forms of hanging out that had, come into my life pretty easily pre-pandemic, but that I was wondering sometimes why I missed them, especially when I could look back on so many sort of awkward memories surrounding forms of hanging out that I had engaged in. And one of the first chapters that I wrote for the book is the chapter on parties, and I think that people actually have pretty mixed feelings about parties. Some people love them, some people hate them. But during the pandemic, when I was going to no parties whatsoever, it gave me the opportunity to kind of think about, what is it that we're doing when we have a party? And what our lives feel like when we can't have them, when we can't get together and mark occasions or mark time passing by getting a bunch of people together in a room. And so that kind of sparked my thinking on the subject a little bit more, even as I was reflecting on, some parties I've been to that weren't all that successful or all that fun for me personally. And I have a few anecdotes about that in the book when I talk about, not the best parties I've ever been to.
over COVID, I was supposed to have my like undergraduate graduation ceremony, and that was completely canceled.
I'm sorry.
We had like that little like blip where there was a video with everyone's name on the screen for like a second, and that was it. So I feel like there were a lot of different types of gatherings, like big and small, that kind of went by the wayside a little bit. Do you talk about like different scales like that?
Yeah, I do. It's something that I was thinking a lot about, as we were missing out on those occasions in the midst of the pandemic. But I've noticed, even since things have become a little bit more manageable for us with the COVID virus, I don't feel like there's been a full-scale return to these kinds of gatherings. It's been more of sort of like a halting return. And I think with that, there has come some like increased thought about, what these kinds of gatherings are for, what we want out of them, or why we have them, or maybe even rethinking some of them, that some of the ways we used to have for gathering together, maybe we don't need to have anymore, and we can, come up with different ways to celebrate events. But I am sorry about your graduation. That just doesn't sound fair.
It was a total bummer. And it was interesting kind of like as a group, like as friends, trying to navigate, well, how can we recontextualize what's going on and make the most of the situation? So do you have any suggestions on how to approach like that exactly? Like how do we change the way that we hang out?
Yeah. This is a question that inevitably has come up since I have published the book. I think that people sometimes assume that I am now some sort of expert on hanging out, which I am not. I like to think of the book more as kind of like an experiment than a chronicle of my expertise on the subject. But I do provide some pointers, and one of the reasons I do that is because, like you were saying, I was talking to friends during the pandemic who were saying, like, I think I've forgotten how to do this. I don't know what it means anymore to do it. And so, that led me to conclude the book with a chapter that I call How to Hang Out. And it's, kind of tongue-in-cheek, because I don't think there's any particular recipe for how to make it successful. But I do offer some pointers there. And a list of sort of like tips and guidelines. And one of the first guidelines that I have is take time, which is, kind of a silly one, I suppose, on the surface, but also I think a really important one, because it has to do with saying yes to social activities and saying no to other things that would threaten the time that you would give to social activities. And that can be really hard for people to, clear out space in their calendar for spending time with friends or hanging out. And another tip that I give in the How to Hang Out section is also take space and take opportunities for taking up space. And here I'm talking particularly about like hanging out in public space, trying to find ways to exist in public together or in these, third places that I talk about in the book. So things like bookstores and libraries and parks and all kinds of public spaces that allow us to kind of like enter into that space with a very low bar or requirement for why we have to be there and how we have to use it, which I think really helps hanging out.
Absolutely.
Sounds excellent. And so Jess was mentioning that the book is about to come out in paperback. So tell us a little bit about that. When is that coming out?
So the paperback version is coming out in January, and it has been slightly expanded. The press, after the success of the hardback, wanted me to expand it with a new afterword. So I've provided a new afterword, which I'm looking forward to. And it's sort of reflecting on the experiences that I had this past summer in the wake of the floods that we experienced here in Vermont, and how I saw people hanging out together to try to make things better, to clean stuff up, to repair things, whatever, and the important work that goes into doing that with community. So that comes out in January. I've got a few events scheduled around the paperback release in January, and I'm looking forward to those.
Great. Are there any events in Vermont you want to tell us about?
Yes, so I will be at Northshire Books giving a talk there, and you're going to have to remind me of the date.
I know.
I think it's Thursday the 11th, right?
I believe that's correct. Yes,
Okay.
at 6 p.m.
That's my birthday,
Right.
so maybe I'll come and we can celebrate your graduation and my birthday.
And I am also doing a online event sponsored by Vermont Humanities, and I know that's on Wednesday, January 10th, and that is free online for anyone who wants to attend. You can check it out on the Vermont Humanities website and sign up for an RSVP, which will get you the code for the Zoom meeting. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah, wonderful.
Well, Shiela, thank you so much for coming out and joining us today. And Jess and I usually do a little segment right now that's called Last, Now, Next, where we share the last book we read, what we're reading now, and what we're looking forward to reading next. So we'd love it if you wanted to play along.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll go first. So this month is National Novel Writing Month, and so I'm working on a sequel to my first novel. And so, as I was just saying earlier when we were chatting, it's very hard for me to read fiction during November because you're trying to write 50,000 words and you've got your own characters and their dialogue. You're just swamped. So I read this book called Refuse to be Done by Matt Bell, and this was recommended to me by a friend who just graduated from the MFA program at Bennington College. So this was a craft book. So this book is about how to write and rewrite a novel in 3 drafts. Oh, wow. And I really liked it. I love reading craft books, so it was fantastic. So to anyone out there who is writing or who just enjoys reading about writing, and he also references a lot of movies and screenplays where he thinks people are doing things well, and I really liked all of the references that he used. And the other thing that I really liked in this book was it talked about, and this works for anybody who's doing anything creative, that sometimes you just need to take a break and you need to let art in and you need to let life in. So taking a break for art and life every once in a while, and whether that means if you're a writer, going off and taking a sculpting class or singing or doing something else, but just really recharging your creative battery by letting in art and life. So I really like that. So it's a fun little book.
It's awesome.
And then, yeah, I loved it. And next on my list, because it's my book club, we're reading The River to Remember by William Kent Kruger. I'm a pretty big William Kent Kruger fan, so this is on my nightstand, or will be after the show. So I'm going to get started on this over the holiday. But I loved Ordinary Grace by him, and This Tender Land is one of my favorite books. So I'm really excited digging into that. So technically that's my now. And then after that, I'm really excited about this book. So this is by a Vermont author. So this book is written by Kenneth Caddo. I don't know if we say it, Caddo. Lives in northern Vermont, has career educator, has been an educator his whole life. There was just a wonderful article about him in 7 Days.
I saw that.
Did you read that article? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this book was a finalist in the National Book Award. Mm-hmm. And they just announced he didn't win, but he was one of the finalists. And it's a YA book, but about a young man growing up with some challenges in northern Vermont, and gathers actually the name of the dog in the story. So I'm really, really looking forward to digging into this. So that's kind of what's hanging out on my nightstand. What have you got, Jess?
It's awesome. So I have a very heavy pile today.
I know.
I just read, and I actually have yet to cook anything
Those are
from
all
this.
big books.
But I just read through Sola El Wali's new cookbook, Start Here, and I am like a huge fan of her presence online. She does all of these videos on YouTube, and her approach to cooking is just so like comfortable, and she very much like, she's just such a creative person, and I am always so intrigued by recipes that she comes up with. There's a series that she does with New York Times with her husband where the two of them will receive like a mystery ingredient, and like it will be like pickles or Hot Pockets or something, and they have to create like an entire meal and dessert with that ingredient, kind of like chopped, I guess. And like they always just come up with the most amazing things, and so I was really interested to see what she had to say. And in this, she has a lot of very amazing looking creative recipes, but she also just breaks down the fundamentals of how to make them. And it's very approachable. Like her sense of like voice is so strong. She doesn't ever come, like, it doesn't feel like she's like instructing you on how to do something so much as like she's a friend and she's just a guiding hand, and she's offering you tips. And I found it so accessible, and I'm very excited about it. So that's like, I'm the most excited about that cookbook of all of the ones that come out. You know, there's always so many this time of year. And then I just started reading House of Leaves.
I love that book.
By Mark Danielinsky. And this book is so wild. It's just, it's crazy. It's moving. It is, it's just, the formatting is really unique. There are moments.
Creepy,
it's
right?
creepy. It's weird. There are moments where you actually have to turn the book like upside down to read it. This is, I believe it's called the full color edition, and certain text is different colors. I just love it when,
see it.
yeah, I love it when an author plays.
footnoted and-
Yeah, it's all annotated. So it's the story of someone, a dead man's memoirs were found in an apartment. And this is kind of the story of like what happened to him. And what you learn is that he was living in a house, that is actually a little bit bigger on the inside than on the outside. And it keeps growing. And it is, there's nothing quite like it. Like, it is really spectacular. And I feel like it's going to stay with me for a very long time, kind of in that haunting way. So after that, I feel like I should kind of take a little bit of, change my pace a little bit. So I'm going to read some nonfiction. I'm so excited about this. This was recommended by one of our booksellers, Alden, who I love everything he recommends. And this is, it's The Burning of the World, The Great Chicago Fire, and the War for a City's Soul. And the way he describes this book makes it sound like incredible. Basically, it is like an extremely detailed, exhaustively researched play-by-play of all of the events that happened like as they unfold in this disaster in a way that makes you feel like you're there. And I just love that. I love when history really comes alive and comes off the page, and that's what this is supposed to deliver.
Oh, so that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. And that's all for me for now.
Well, I don't have visuals, so I will mime as I'm talking about the 3 books in my reading list. The one I just finished, and I'm sort of in mourning over it because I loved the book so much, and I loved the series that it was from, and now it's over for me, is a book called Olaf Audensson by the Swedish writer Sigrid Undset. And it's the 4th one in the Olaf Audensson tetralogy called Winter. And this is a series of books that Sigrid Undset actually wrote in the 1920s. She was a Nobel Prize winner in the 1920s for fiction. And they never quite found their audience in America. I think they kind of languished under like a bad translation for a while, but they've recently been translated again into English by Tina Nunnally, who's a very renowned Scandinavian translator, and published to the University of Minnesota Press. They are wonderful historical novels that take place in 12th century Norway, and they're just, I'm so attached to them. Like, I was reading every one the second the new translation came out, and I'm just in great grief now that I have finished the last one of them, called Winter, which is the end of the main character's overall arc. But they're beautiful, beautiful historically researched books. The one that I am now reading is a work of nonfiction, a work of sociology by the French-Moroccan sociologist Eva Euse, and it is called The End of Love. And it's really interesting. It's about basically the kind of like sociopolitics of love and attachment, and how those things are like under threat in the modern era, how they've been changing over the years and things like that. It's a really kind of like searing indictment of the way that we kind of like capitalize upon the idea of love in modern society. So that's what I'm reading right now, and I know what's coming up next for me because I have it like sitting on my nightstand ready to go next. So 3rd, I'm going to be starting a new collection of short stories by the British writer Jeanette Winterson. She just released a collection of ghost stories that's called Night Side of the River. So I have that sitting. That'll be my Thanksgiving break reading later this week when I get to it. So
perfect. Oh, great. Well, Shiela, again, congratulations on the paperback coming out of Hanging Out, and it's just been wonderful to have you with us today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. This was super fun, guys.
Yeah, right. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
And now we're so pleased to be joined by Paige Vignola, who is the Assistant Director of the Manchester Community Library. Hello, Paige.
Hi, I'm glad to be back.
Oh, it's so great to see you again.
It's fun.
It is. So we always like to have a little hot topic every month, and we were emailing, and so this month we were going to talk about what happens when you discover an author for the first time. Do you have to go back and read like everything they've ever written? So I'm going to start with you, Paige. How do you feel about that question?
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely become the obsessive reader. No question about that. When I find an author that I really enjoy, it's like, oh, okay, I need to do that. And then I write the whole list of everything that I need to read. I think the first author that happened to me with was probably Milan Kundera. And I just could not stop reading anything that he had written. I just recently, it's the reason why I found it fun that you asked this question. I just recently had a friend come into the library and recommend The 1,000 Doors of January to me. And I had never read Alex Harrow. I was like, okay, sure, why not? But did not have that book currently in the library, so I picked up another one, the, I guess what is the
Starling House is the new one.
No, it was the Spindle Splintered.
Oh.
And I am a recovering folklorist, so a huge fan of any kind of retellings, and this one is the Sleeping Beauty story retold. I read that probably in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm like, I need more, and so now I'm reading. Currently, I've dived into her the Once and Future Witches, and I'm so in love with her style. So yes, absolutely, I will be an obsessive reader. I proudly wear that badge.
Excellent. And how about you, Jess?
See, I find it so interesting to hear your response page and then to hear this question that you post, because I have never, it's never even occurred to me that this is something I can do. Like, I have always just kind of picked up a book and experienced it and then kind of like put it down and like let it sit with me. And I've never felt like compelled afterward to stay in that world, like that kind of the style and the presence that that particular author might have brought. Like, I don't know why. It's interesting that it feels to me like I've always been content. And even then, like sometimes you feel very restless afterward, and because you want to stay in that book, and it's over, and you kind of are like, well, now what? Like, where am I? What am I doing? And it's never even occurred to me that like I could kind of maybe have a similar experience if I just continue to read like the catalog. But I think perhaps part of me has always felt like, well, what if the next one that I pick up isn't going to be the same? And what if there was something really special that happened in here that I'm not going to find again? And perhaps like subconsciously I've been, pacing myself in this way because I don't want to disappoint myself. Like I've built the author up in a way.
Yeah, see, I think of it a little bit differently, right? Because for me, it's not a matter of is the book going to be the same. I fully expect the book is going to be different. But when I fall in love with an author, I fall in love with the way that they write. And maybe it might not be the content, but it's the style. Maybe it's the the philosophy behind their writing. So I want to stay in that voice more than in that text.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for me, so one of the authors, because the other way to look at this is when you fall in love with an author, then anything they come out with, you're like pre-ordering it. I just want it to show up magically, or going on, going to the library and getting on the reservation list for it. So, I'm like that with the Immortals. So I loved Rules of Civility, immediately had to read Gentlemen in Moscow, then read The Lincoln Highway. Like whatever he writes, like I'm gonna read it. Yeah, and then I have found like sometimes, I just like that comfort read that I just know. Sometimes I just want a sweet story, a quick read over the weekend. And so Heather Weber writes these lovely stories. They usually have a Southern setting. There's sort of a little romance, a little magic, great characters. And I think the first book of hers I read was Midnight at the Blackbird Cafe. And then I just was in that mood. I was like, I just want something like that. And of course, she's written a million of them. So I'm kind of working through her canon. It's kind of like my little, like when I just know I just want that little Southern comfort read that I can always find something. And she has a new one out called The Coffee Shop of Curiosities, which is just like immediately goes on my want to read list because I just want to remember it. And when I need it, just know that it's going to be there.
Well, title alone would pull me into that
cute?
one.
Yeah. Oh, well, fun. Well, I want to make sure we have time to go over all the events that are coming up at both the North Shire and the library. Do you want to get started and tell us what's coming up at North Shire?
Yes, I have a very short list because we start winding down on our events because things, it's all hands on deck. So I will be on the floor quite a bit for anyone that pops into the bookstore. But we only have really one thing coming up in December, and it is very special in honor of the publication of How the Grinch Lost Christmas, which is an expansion of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, of course. The Grinch himself will be visiting our store for a very special story time and meet and greet, and that's on Sunday, December 3rd at 2 p.m. I'm very excited for that. People can register online at northshire.com. Yeah,
that sounds fun.
That
sounds like a lot of fun.
It's going to be darling.
Yeah.
And what about you, Paige? What's happening at the library?
Well, the library goes the exact opposite direction, right? Because there's so much to, get accomplished during the month of December. So the first thing that we've got going on is we have our Winter Bazaar that takes place on December 2nd. So go to the Winter Bazaar the next day, go listen to the Grinch. So this is an all-day event where we have the library is open to vendors of art, artisans, crafts, all different things, so that people who are looking to do a little bit of holiday shopping can meet up with all of our local artists, and the two shall be a great combination. So that's going to be December 2nd, and that goes from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I've got 30 different vendors, I think, coming into the building. Actually, Maple Street Rock Band is going to be playing a little concert for us that afternoon, trying to get some food trucks in so that shoppers get hungry. There will be a little bit of something to do there as well.
Sounds great.
We have as well a special event taking place on the evening of December 8th. I am very excited about this one. So this is a 2-person performance of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I mean, it's just amazing. So Stephen Collins is an actor that I had encountered down in Bennington at their library, and he does, I had him come into the library last year to do a Walt Whitman performance, and then he had a room full of 10th graders completely and totally engrossed, and it was amazing.
Whoa.
And he is Ebenezer Scrooge, and Purnima Kirby, who is his partner in this production, does every other character in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I'm very excited about this one. So that's Friday evening, December 8th, and that's going to be from 6 to 7. On December 9th, we're doing a sing-along and cookie exchange, right? So for the little kids, maybe preschool, a little bit younger than that. So our youth services librarian is, she called in the assistance of actually our advancement coordinator. He was a professional piano player, so he's going to be playing the music, and Carrie is going to be leading a bunch of Long Trail High School students who are going to be leading the kids in a variety of different songs, hopefully a couple different languages as well, so that should be fun. On the 14th of December, this is one I'm actually also extra excited about. Joseph Citro, who is a local author who writes about all kinds of different weird and creepy things that go on in Vermont. He and I had a conversation about reviving the Victorian tradition of holiday ghost stories. And so he's coming into the library on the 14th. It's Thursday the 14th, and it's going to be from 6 to 7 o'clock. And he's going to be doing his local lore, dark and dangerous tales of Christmas, right? And so that's going to be a lot of fun. I was trying to convince him that maybe a stocking cap and like a smoking jacket or something along those lines should be, trying to get that little Victorian vibe going. So that should be a lot of fun. And then on the 16th, we have Taconic Music coming in for their holiday concert, and if you've ever listened to a Taconic concert, you know that you need to be there for that. We're going to have a little reception beforehand, so community members are going to be bringing in food and snacks. We're going to have some hot chocolate and all that sort of stuff, and we've got a couple of different local high school performers who are going to be playing during the reception before Taconic plays, and that's going to be from 5 to 7. Doors open at 5, Taconic plays at 5:45, reception preceding that, and then one last thing, we have Taconic doing their annual Family New Year's concert, and so that, again, something that one should not miss, and that is, a bunch of younger musicians as well, and they, it's a family experience. So that's December 30th, and that one is at 2 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we got a lot going on in
You guys
December.
do go in different directions
absolutely.
in December. I think
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. And of course, all these events are available on either the northshire.com or at the Manchester Community Library website.
Absolutely.
You just go to your event tab and you guys have everything there. So, well, it's so great to be back with both of you. Happy holidays. We're in the middle of it, and I hope to see you on the floor at the bookstore, and I know I'll see you at the library.
I'll be there.
And for everyone else, we just are wishing you and your families a safe and joyous holiday season. And until next time, happy reading.